Everyone hear me online all right? They can, good. Welcome everyone online. So just before we start, Pippa has an announcement to make. We're carrying, I don't know how long I'm going to be talking for tonight. I don't know if we're going to go into groups later. I don't really know what's going on, but we will, I don't always like the format. This is just personal. I'm not criticising it. But I don't always like the format of just talk and then groups. So I'll just talk for a bit. But if you've got any, it actually helps me if people got questions, if they just butt in and ask them, or just put your hands up and ask questions as I'm going along. I'll probably stop in at odd times and having like random breaks so you can shuffle that, because it is also boring to just sit and listen to someone for more than like 20 minutes, 25 minutes, particularly these days. People, including myself, start shuffling around and losing interest. So hope all that's clear. Okay. So basically, I don't really know what's going to happen, although I sort of know what I'm going to say. So we are looking at this series of talks on what Nyanarichi said earlier, the refuge tree. So they're happening in a few weeks, and I think we had last week. We had I think it was the first one with Bodhinaya. So I'm going to be looking at one of Sangha's teachers tonight, a chap called Chatral Rimpoche, who was a Tibetan. Yeah. So he's a Tibetan man. I haven't got anything more to say about that. So I wasn't joking earlier. But what I'm going to do is, I have got more to say. What I'm going to do is I just wanted to look at the refuge tree first, because it is a fairly important practice and image in the tree, right, in the Buddhist order. So this is the refuge tree here. This, you probably can't, and we've got the image up there. This particular image was painted by an order member called Chintamani. It's really lovely. It really kind of captures the sort of sense of light and stuff, but it's really difficult as a sort of. There's a few images of the refuge tree, but this one is a bit tricky because the figures are just very small to see on it. So, but from a distance you can get the sense of sort of light and space and stuff. But yeah, maybe you can come just later and have a look at it. So the practice that this image is related to is called the going for refuge and prostration practice. So that's a practice that you can take on once you've asked for ordination and been sort of introduced to it on an ordination training retreat. It's traditionally part of what are called the Mula yogas, which I believe are Tibetan, or I don't really know the history. I'm not going to say too much of that. But they include the going for refuge and prostration practice, the bodhicitta practice, offering of the mandala, the vajrasattva practice, and they're sort of visualization practices mostly, and they're also called the preliminary practices. And the idea is that you do these four practices quite regularly and quite a lot, and you do them for just a long time to prepare your mind to be able to then engage with sort of, so to speak, sort of insight practices or more specific Buddhist reflections on like shunyata and no self and impermanence and stuff like that. So we don't obviously, but that comes from a very traditional Indo-Tibetan background doing it like that, and we don't really sort of do it. Although there is some formality with like having to ask for ordination and being introduced to it formally. So Sangha actually called this the I've got it written wrong. I've sort of put it as the tree of refuge and inspiration, but it wasn't that, was it? Because you said it earlier, which I assume you're right and not me.
Who knows? I think it's the tree of refuge in this.
Okay, yeah, that is right. When you said it, I thought that was right. So it's a tree of refuge and respect. So what you're doing I wonder what that was, it's a microphone. What you're doing in the practice is you're basically sort of playing out the whole myth of going for refuge. But you're also sort of playing out the whole myth of one's life as well. So what you do in the practice is you build up this visualization, which I'm going to say more about the specifics of it in a minute. Actually, I'll say that now because you build up the image, and then what you do is, I'll explain more about what is in the image in a minute, is you imagine that, so it's a vast thing sort of coming out, the sort of infinite blue sky, this vast sort of image with the Buddha at the center and all these other teachers. So you've got, some little thingy thing, you've got the teachers of the Buddha of the past, Dipankara, and the Buddha of the future, Maitreya. Then you've got either to the, what's that left of them, you've got the 5 archetypal bodhisattvas. Then you've got opposite them, you've got the historical disciples of the Buddha, of the historical Buddha, so the sort of actual living peeps. Behind the Buddhas, you've got the Dharma texts. So this is the sort of, you can probably see it, this square sort of shapy shape here. Above them, and all of these on these different lotuses, and then above them you've got the teachers of the past, which are the teachers of India, Tibet, China and Japan. Above them you've got the 5 archetypal Buddhas, representing the different aspects of the enlightened mind as it manifests to us so that we can recognize qualities of it. And at the top you've got Vajrasattva, who is a primordial Buddha, representing sort of primordial enlightenment, sort of beyond space and time. So what you've got there is you've got all of the refuges. You've got the Buddha, you've got the Dharma with these texts, and then you've got the Sangha, which is all of it. Missed out the important bit, which is the lotus at the front. You've got Sangharakshita and his 8 main teachers. And I'll be talking about one of them tonight. Also, you've got Dharmapala, what's his name? Aragangana. What? Anagarika Dharmapala. Thank you. Words. And Dr. Ambedkar. I'm not going to say too much about them, but they were sort of very important figures for Bhante and sort of Western Buddhism, and yeah. So you've got these 3 refuges there. You've got the 3 refuges, and what you do is you see they manifest out this huge blue sky of shunyata and emptiness, which is sort of appealing in itself, of complete sort of emptiness. And these lotuses sort of arise with these different teachers on it, and then you visualize yourself and all beings in front of this image that has sort of manifested, and you imagine your mother and all women at one shoulder and sort of surrounding, and your father and all men. So it's all beings, well, all human beings. I suppose you could bring animals in, it might get a bit confusing though. It's all human beings. And what you then do is you start prostrating to the refuges. So if you've ever seen people making offerings to the shrine, when they get down full flash, or like on the floor, ding, that's a prostration where they come down on their knees and the whole body's on the floor. I was horrified the first time I saw someone do it, and I wanted to run out of the room and thought, if you've got no respect, what are you doing? And I was genuinely horrified, but I got used to it, and even I've done it myself. So what you do in it is it's a totally encompassing practice, because you've got the image there, you've got all beings surrounding you, you have a sense of really feeling it, really feeling this presence, really feeling these figures, and you say out loud, you go, I'm going to have to show you, aren't I? I'm not going to do the prostration. You go, ah hum, to the best of all refuges I go. And you have your eyes closed and imagine it's there. And then you go full on the floor. As you're going down, you say internally, you say, to the Buddha for refuge I go, to the Dharma for refuge I go, to the Sangha for refuge I go. And by the time you back up, you're ah hum, to the best of all refuges I go. And you shoot down, and you do that. You just keep doing that for quite a while. So you've got body, speech and mind totally and utterly absorbed in the practice. Your mind, because you're thinking, you're holding the image in your mind. Your body is physically engaged in it. Your voice is engaged in it. You've got this internal. So it sounds like an awful lot's happening, and it is. But when you get used to it and you do it, it is hugely transformative, and it really focuses you going for refuge. And also, I'll say more about that later, but you imagine all beings doing it with you. I'll come back to that all beings bit later, I think. I'm not going to say what happens next, because I don't want to sort of give the whole practice away, really, but it goes a little bit further, and then sort of there's a sort of dramatic sort of ending to it. After you then sit in meditation, but I'm not going to say what that is. So I'm not trying to be all secretive, but I suppose if you formally introduced it at a point, I don't want to sort of accidentally do that now. So I will say the thing about all beings, and then we'll have a little bit of a random break. So the thing with having all beings kind of prostrating with you is it's not like you're sort of persuading all beings that they need to go for refuge and they need to come to the Buddhist center and sort their lives out. It's nothing like that. You're not kind of trying to persuade beings that they should, stop their religion and just follow the religion that you're into. It's more that, all beings are always looking, are always directing their lives towards something. You can't help but try and have meaning in your life and direct your life to something that seems worthwhile, however minor that is, even if it's kind of like, people find like meaning in the most random and apparently sort of weird things like, Married at First Sight or EastEnders or, whatever. It's not, I'm genuinely not criticizing any of those things. I don't feel that at all. But it's like, people just do. It's like we can't help but gather a sense of meaning and myth around anything that we're directing our mind to. And you've probably seen that in all of your lives at different periods. It's like, you find meaning in it. It's in music, it's in art, in communication, in the kind of work that you do, whatever it is, even if it's like, I don't know, my granddad was a bus engineer. If you're fixing bus engines, it's like there's something engaging about that somehow that makes you want to do it, and he did it for years, So you can't help but engage and look towards something and have some sort of meaning. I'm not saying that I gave him meaning in his life, but... So what's happening with the refuge tree and the image of moving towards that is that you're imagining everyone has found a sense of ease and security in moving towards a mode of operating which involves letting go of attachment to things that will not bring us ultimate fulfillment, and moving towards something that will give us an ultimate fulfillment, like basically the three jewels. So it's a higher state of consciousness, a complete sort of end to suffering and dissatisfaction, and you feel that all beings are just have found out how to do that. They've got that in their hearts, and they're moving towards that, sort of whatever that looks like in a way. You just feel in your heart a sense of ease that all beings, and no one is different to me. Everyone just wants to be happy and well. Everyone wants to avoid suffering. It's proper kind of basic, nuts and bolts Buddhism. But in the practice, that's what's happening. Is you're feeling all beings are moving towards, true sort of values, meaning, and are connecting with a direction whereby they, if they carry on practicing, they will be free from suffering, and ultimately gain enlightenment and feel that, the wisdom of seeing impermanence and the complete and utter sort of deep responsiveness to others and to suffering, as it's presented. So that's what and I just find that really sort of important, because and I think from doing the practice, I've definitely felt a sense of, well, just that, I'm not any different to anyone else, I suppose it can be a bit of sort of spiritual snobbery sometimes, that we've found something that's really deep and meaningful. It is deep and meaningful, but it's like everyone's looking for something. Everyone's trying to engage with their lives and have meaning in their lives. It's like, it's just a human state is to do that. So, yeah, that's how it sort of helped me in a way. All right, let's have a first random break. Is everyone all right? A little bit of a shuffle around.
So that sort of prostration practice that you're talking about, is that completely traditional practice? It's not, is it, or is it sort of something that's sort of tuned and evolved for that specifically, aren't they?
Yeah, both. So for those online, Steve's asking, is it a traditional practice, basically? Well, it is very traditional. That's what I was going to mention at some point, but I would have probably forgot. So thank you for reminding me. There's lots of different refuges trees affiliated to most of the different Buddhist schools, so particularly the sort of Vajrayana schools, and I think some of the Mahayana schools, although I'm sort of guessing because I'm up front. But certainly the Vajrayana schools will have an image. So there might be a Nyingma refuge tree, which has a Padmasambhava at the centre, and there's also ones who will have like Tsongkhapa at the centre, who was a historical Tibetan teacher, and then all his teachers. So you get this real sense of lineage of like where the teachings come from. So, but they all, as far as I know, they would all, like a lot of these visualization practices, would manifest quite naturally and they would grow in a way as the practices developed. So Sangha Rakshita didn't want to just import. There was an initial refuge tree before this one that had a bit more of the sort of, slightly more, I suppose, esoteric Indo-Tibetan images in it, with some more wrathful images and Dharma protectors and so on. But he wanted to strip it down, so he sort of created this. And these are figures that are very much that Sangha actually very much sort of felt a connection with, and all the figures on it he's felt were very important to Buddhism, and they were founders of sort of particular new ways forward in sort of finding a new sort of route to enlightenment. That's one way you could sort of talk about it. So yeah, I don't know if that sort of answered you. Yeah, but he created this one, yeah, because anything adopted from another system would just be, we'd have to be doing quite a lot of negotiating with, like, okay, because we haven't just Tuan hasn't just adopted another school's teaching. We've sort of, as the refuge tree sort of explains in a way, we've got this taken lots of different sort of aspects of Buddhism that all seem to have in common this sort of central idea of sort of gaining enlightenment. Okay. Oh, it's 9 o'clock. So that's pretty much all about the refuge tree. But as But I think the idea with it is to just sort of connect with it, connect with the different figures, and just get a sense of, the lineage going back to the Buddha, and even going beyond. I think it goes beyond the Buddha. It goes to Vajrasattva, which is almost like the enlightenment behind the Buddha that sort of came through Siddhartha Gautama, who became sort of the Buddha Shakyamuni. So it gets pretty sort of cosmic in a way. But it's quite, there's so much in it to gain sort of inspiration from, in terms of all the different figures and all the different aspects of it. But what we're going to look at tonight is we're going to look at one of Sangharakshita's teachers in particular. I mean, in a way, I didn't just want to talk about Chatral Sangha Dorje on his own, because there's so much to be said about the context that he sits in Tree Ratna and sort of on the Refuge tree and stuff. So that's why I always gave that sort of background. So Chatral Sangha Dorje, you will not be able to see him. He's there on the Refuge tree. Take him in. Quite a figure, isn't he? It's a joke. Zach, do you want? Hold on, do you want it yet? Yeah, go on. Hit the first slide. So. So we're going to have an image of Chatral Rimpoche. So Chatral Rinpoche, Sangharakshita first met him in 1956 when Sangharakshita was 31 years old. He's a very mysterious figure. Chatral means preparation's good, isn't it? Writing things down without concerns. I forgot what his name meant. So Chatral means, so it's the Rinpoche sort of without concerns in a way. So he was from Eastern Tibet. Sangharakshita met him when Sangharakshita was living in Kalimpong, where he lived for many years in northern India. And it was a time where lots of refugees were fleeing the Chinese invasion and were coming over, which I find it's very strange that Sangharakshita ended up in Kalimpong and met all these teachers. I think bar Jagdish Kashyap, the rest of them he met in Kalimpong because it was very near the sort of Tibetan border and the sort of foothills of the Himalayas, and that was where he sort of met a lot of these characters, his Tibetan teachers in particular. So Chatral Rinpoche is from Eastern Tibet. He lived in a tribe. When he was 15 years old, he left his family to seek out spiritual teachers. So, I mean, from there, as far as I'm concerned, it's like we've got an issue as Westerners. It's like if someone in our country said, he's left his family to go and look for spiritual inspiration, you'd be on the phone to social services. I mean, you'd be thinking, okay, is this kid all right? What's going on? Because it's so, it comes from a very sort of traditional society where it was quite normal it probably wasn't normal, but it wasn't exceptional for someone 15 years old. I mean, another figure on here, oh gosh, he was the tall Dilgo Khyentse, thanks. Dilgo Khyentse Rinpoche. It's like he's written some astounding, inspired poetry from when he was meditating in solitary confinement in caves at 16 years old, and it's stuff that it will just blow your mind. It's like he's 16 years old and he's living in a cave on his own. I just don't get it. It's like but this is the thing. It's like there's so much sort of translation for us to do, because we can't do that. There aren't caves in Britain. Well, there probably are, but you're not going to do very well not meditating. But yeah, it's just so different. But obviously these sort of guys and girls that would do that was just it was working, and they were totally, Chatral Rinpoche left his family at 15 and he just headed off to find spiritual teachers and did really well from it and never turned back. Do you know what I mean? It just blows my mind. It's like, but you have also got the image of the story of Sangharakshita, which wasn't far different in a way, in terms of that strong element of going forth from the sort of family. It was different, but not totally in a way. So Chatral Rinpoche, so his life was characterized by a very sort of nomadic lifestyle. He would always travel on foot. He'd never ride a sort of yak or a horse, which was quite traditional, but he'd always travel on foot. He lived in hermitages and caves in Tibet, and similarly, when he came over to Kalimpong, he would only stay in sort of hermitages and so to speak, sort of holy places. And he was a staunch vegetarian as well, which sounds sort of strange to us because, like, of course, if you become a mitra, you one of the requirements is that you've sort of given up sort of eating meat. But for Tibetan Buddhism, it's like they still did eat meat even in sort of ceremonial settings and stuff, which weirded my sister out once when she was at a Tibetan. What do you call it, sort of ceremony, and she suddenly got a piece of ham in her hand, which freaked her out a bit. So he's a very, very sort of, like, all his life he's really staunch and like solid about vegetarianism, which didn't seem to be common either, that he seemed to have this real connection with vegetarianism. He was very unpredictable, and he would never stay long in any one place. He'd often just like get up and just go and just sort of move off. So he was very sort of unpredictable. He was part of the Nyingma school, which have Padmasambhava as their sort of head, so to speak, or the centre of their mandala, or the centre of their refuge tree. And they're known again for very unconventional, sort of non-monastic, sort of yogic wanderings. And again, with them, that what they're taking at their core is the three jewels in a very stripped down way. That, you know, the sort of enlightenment, the end of suffering, what will get you to enlightenment, and, you know, and connections with sort of Sangha, as also the sort of vessel to support that exploration. He really strongly resisted any involvement in sort of formal monasticism or any kind of bureaucracy at all. And there was one time when he was in Tibet, he led this sort of I keep forgetting the word. It's not going to come if I. What's a puja called? Ritual. A ritual. Thank you. It's not difficult. He led this sort of ritual over a few days and initiations, and at the end of it, the chap had sort of hosted it. It was quite wealthy, and he showed Chatral Rinpoche this sort of bit, this table with all these, like, you know, kind of beautiful sort of goods on it, and sort of golds and silver and sort of precious jewels. And he said to Chatral Rinpoche, you know, this was his offering, an offering on behalf of lots of people that come. And Chatral Rinpoche thanked him. He was on a table with a table sort of. This is going to get cloth. It's getting embarrassing. Apparently, he just swept them all up into this tablecloth, handed it to the regent, and said, "Thank you. Will you look after these for me?" And just left. So that was quite sort of typical. His sort of approach in a way. He was a. Let's chuck another slide up there, Zach. I think that's possibly my favourite image of Chatral Rinpoche. Actually, he just looks, compared to the last one, he looks quite sort of brutish, and this one he looks quite sort of serene. He was also said to be a very highly realised Dzogchen master. So Dzogchen, the aim is to sort of discover the ultimate sort of primordial state, characterised by purity, spontaneity, that's associated with the luminous mind. I got that off Wikipedia. I jest you not. My point being that I know nothing about Dzogchen, firstly. And secondly, Dzogchen's very sort of popular in the West as a sort of like, just get into contact with the primordial awareness, and, you know, don't have to do much transformation, just dip into this state, it'll be great. And but I don't know how true this is, but apparently, he was certainly said to be a very, very highly realized Dzogchen master. And it was said that he didn't hand on the teachings. He didn't have a sort of disciple to hand on all his teachings with, because he said that as far as he could see, there wasn't anyone that was experienced enough to receive them, which I just found, so what do you make of that? I just found that sort of quite interesting in a way, that he felt that there wasn't anyone that was sort of, aware enough to sort of receive those teachings. Have a look at Wikipedia if you want to know more about Dzogchen. Oh, that was it. I put Dzogchen into the search bar, and it said Dzogchen teacher near me came up, which I just thought was like really funny. It was just like, I think you could go to Google Maps and just like get your directions to go and see. But he said literally, he said, put Dzogchen in it, put Dzogchen teacher near me, as it does do when you put anything in. Right. That's the end of that little section. Everyone all right? Jeez, if I just keep boring, just keep talking, you're going to start falling asleep because I've timed it weirdly. Any questions or fidgets or headstands you want to do? Anything? No.
Did you get in touch with the teacher?
I didn't know. No. I thought he'd probably be too realised for me, so I let it go. Yeah. Okay, Zach, let's... so that's... I just quite like this image as well. It's quite interesting. You're probably not going to be able to see it, some of you guys over there. This was in his sort of, obviously, in his later life. Try and have a look when you get home if you can. Go online and don't look up Dzogchen teacher near me. But look at, just type in Chatral Rimpoche, because there's some really beautiful images of him online. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, we're going to do something, well, it's not that different, is it really? There's only so much you can do in a Buddhist centre. I'm going to just read from Sangha meeting with him. I think I've said as much as I can about Chatral Rimpoche, but I think I'll read from his meetings with him, which is going to be about 3 pages. Sangha writing, as many of you may know, it can be a bit dense. So just chill out, fidget. If you want to get in your meditation postures and just sit and take in. Often at Padmaloka, where I used to live, the ordination training retreat centre, at the beginning of pujas, we'd have different readings from like Bantu's teachers and stuff, and it was just really nice to just sit and just hear sort of parts of their life and stuff before puja. So I'm going to do that now. It's probably going to take about 10 minutes or something. So just get comfy, do whatever you want to do. So this is Sangha in Kalimpong, 1956. He's 31 years old. As you'll see, we don't know how old Chatral Rimpoche is at this point as well. Yeah. Excuse me. I had met him through my Sikkimese friend Sonap Topge Kazi, who was a great admirer of the Lama and had come from Gangtok to see him and pay his respects. Chatral meant without affairs or without concerns. Sonap Topge explained he was commonly known as Chatral Sangye Dorje on account of his complete indifference to things such as organized monasticism and ecclesiastical position. It was not even clear whether he was a monk or a layman. He roamed freely from place to place, no one knowing where he was going to turn up next or how long he would stay. He was an accomplished yogi, having spent many years in the solitudes of eastern Tibet meditating, and if popular reports were to be believed, he possessed many psychic powers and was a great magician. Despite his indifference to organised monasticism and ecclesiastical position, Sonam Topge added, and his frequently bizarre and eccentric behaviour, Chatral Sangha Dorje was highly esteemed by several prominent members of the Gelug hierarchy. Once, when in Lhasa, he had bestowed a number of esoteric tantric initiations on the regent of Tibet. At the conclusion of ceremonies, which lasted several days, the regent made the customary offerings, which, his position being what it was, were extremely valuable. Chatral Sangha Dorje swept them all onto a cloth, tied the cloth up into a bundle, and handled the bundle to the regent, saying, "Look after these for me," whereupon he resumed his wanderings. Sonam Topge's account intrigued me. In fact, I was fascinated by his picture of the unconventional Lama. So it's my sugar level bleeper, no panic. Sonam Topge's account intrigued me. In fact, I was fascinated by his picture of the unconventional Lama, who, as I later discovered, was widely revered as one of the three great Nyingma gurus of the century. The two others being Jamyang Khyentse Rinpoche and Dudjom Rinpoche. Those are two of Sangha's teachers as well. Seeing my interest, Sonam Topge observed that it would not be difficult for me to meet the Lama, who notoriously did not stand on ceremony and who was very accessible once you had succeeded in tracking him down. He moreover hinted that although Chatral Sangha Dorje was highly unpredictable and one could never be sure how he would respond to a particular request, he might be willing to give me tantric initiation. In any case, I ought not to miss the opportunity of meeting so great a Lama and obtaining his blessing. Thus it was on the morning of the 8th of March, I found myself in the presence of Chatral Rinpoche, as he was so called, who was staying at Tirpai, a village on the outside of the town on the way up to Dalo Hill. I did not know what I had expected the celebrated Nyingma Lama to look like, but in any case, I received something like a shock when we met. He was of indeterminate age, perhaps somewhere between 35 and 45, or even 50. His coarse black hair was cut short like a monk's, and he was clad in a nondescript maroon garment lined with what appeared to be grubby sheepskin. What I was most struck by, however, was his face, which was coarse and unrefined, almost to the point of brutality, and could have easily passed for that of a horny-handed peasant with no thought beyond his pigs and poultry. At the same time, his whole being communicated such an impression of rock-like strength and reliability that one could not but feel reassured. And with Sonam Topge as interpreter, it was not long before the two of us were deep in discussion. As was proper, Chatral Rinpoche took the lead and asked me a number of questions, first about the Vinaya or code of monastic discipline, and then about the Abhidharma. I must have answered his questions to his satisfaction, for from the Abhidharma we progressed through what intermediate steps I no longer recollect, to meditation and meditational experience, so that I was able to tell him about the Bombay friend who received in a state of trance teachings and directives which he believed had come from God. To what extent did he think these could be accepted? Chatral Rinpoche's reply was in agreement with the conclusion that I had already arrived. Teachings and directives received in a state of trance, whether by oneself or another person, were not to be accepted uncritically, but were to be subject to the test of reason and experience, and compared with the Buddha Vachana, or word of the Buddha, as explained by the enlightened masters of India and Tibet. By this time, I'd developed considerable confidence in the Rinpoche. and I therefore asked him to tell me who my yidam or tutelary deity was. Far from showing surprise at my respect, he seemed quite pleased, and after a moment of inner recollection told me that my yidam was Dolma Jungo, or Green Tara, the female bodhisattva of fearlessness and spontaneous helpfulness, adding that Tara had been the tutelary deity of many of the great pandits of India and Tibet. He then proceeded to bestow on me the appropriate initiation, first giving me the 10-syllable mantra, which he pronounced very forcefully. After which he explained the sadhana or spiritual practice which would enable me to identify myself with Green Tara and call down the blessings of the Bodhisattva on myself and on all sentient beings. The latter he did at some length, so that it was mid-afternoon when I finally bade Chatral Rimpoche a grateful farewell, having spent 4 hours in his company. My mood was one of considerable elation. Chatral Rinpoche did not stay long in Kalimpong. Shortly after visiting me at Everton Villas, he resumed his wanderings, and we next met when both of us happened to be in Darjeeling. By that time, he had picked up some Nepali, of which I also had a little knowledge, so that we had no need of an interpreter. At least I have no recollection of anyone else being present. At one point, he opened his hand to reveal a little heap of what seemed to be seed pearls. They were holy relics, he told me. When he was in Rimpoche, he had thrust his hand inside an ancient ruined stupa, and this is what he had found. For the rest of the time I was with him, he spoke in a strange, enigmatic manner that I'd not found easy to follow, and the bizarre magician-like nature of his character was much more in evidence than it had been at our previous meetings. Zach, could you just blast another picture up, please? So yeah, there's another picture of him wandering with his tent on his back. Well, I guess we better just see if anyone's got any. I'll just say this, and then we'll go to some questions. I mean, the whole reason we're sort of looking at these figures, and the reason we have the refuge tree is to just try and connect with the lives of people who have practiced Buddhism to a huge extent. You know, Arloka, who a friend of mine, he painted the image downstairs, of course, and he's painted the first picture of the refuge tree. But you know, he thought that we were. And you start saying something and you think, should I say this? He said he thought that Sangha actually had taught us quite rightly like kindergarten Buddhism. Because a lot of the sort of, you know, the figures from sort of Tibet and stuff, they've come from such a tradition, and their sort of Dharma and sort of knowledge is held in such a sort of esteemed and particular way. But I just find it very interesting sort of coming across, you know, sort of reading about the lives of figures like this, and there's so many more on the refuge tree, like who've led sort of similar lives and very different lives as well. And I think it's just, I remember when I was ordained, I was looking at the refuge tree, and we're doing the prostration practice like every morning at 7 a.m, which annoyed the hell out of me. What a stupid time to be prostrating constantly. I got so annoyed. I used to stand there watching and not go down and just look at everyone going. Anyway. Totally distracted myself. What was I saying?
Prostration practice, crowd of people.
Yeah, I forgot what I was going to say. No, it was after that. Anyway, people, yeah. Well, it's just important to get a sense of sort of, you know, I don't know, just what Buddhist practice looks like. Do you want to just jump to another slide, Zach? and take inspiration that you can then sort of follow up. It's like you can look at the lives of these people, you can reflect on them. The big question is how to translate them into our lives, though, because sometimes I've been on solitary retreat before and read about Milarepa, this famous yogi who just lived in the mountains of Tibet, and it was just frustrating. It's just annoying. It was just like, lives in these caves. He comes out, communicates the Dharma, goes back to his cave, and excuse me. And that, for me, it was just really annoying because I just felt like, God, I can only just handle being in a very comfortable wooden cabin for 3 weeks before I start losing it and feeling a bit weird, and like I need to sort of leave. But then that's why you've got Sangha, because it's like you then hear Sangha talking about Milarepa, and it's like, oh, it makes sense what he's talking about. Anyway, I'll stop talking. Okay, I mean, that's about it. And we've got 5 minutes for any questions or reflections or whatever you want to. If anyone says anything, have you got a microphone over there? Is that great? Zach's got a microphone. But yeah, any questions or comments or whatever.
So Paraga, have you got any suggestions of how you do connect with him?
I suppose it needs a little bit of effort, doesn't it? With any, excuse me, with any sort of any source of. I suppose you get I think the thing to do is, so it won't necessarily work for everyone to go home and try and get engaged with Chatral Rimpoche, but it's like with any source of inspiration, the inspiration has to sort of land on you first and kind of like tickle you a little bit or poke you a little bit, and then you can run with it. But it might not work to try and get really into like, a certain figure if it just doesn't work for you. So the first thing is to feel that there's something about the Dharma, about the teachings, about the Buddha, about whatever it is in the three jewels, or more broadly, that sort of helps you. And so the inspiration needs to, or so to speak, to talk about is the muse needs to come to you first, and then you can move with it. But then the work will be, the effort will be reflecting on the figure, looking at images, looking at any sort of teachings, talking to other people about it, just sort of obvious things like that, and just holding the figure in your mind and think, well, what is it about this figure? I mean, the reason I'm inspired by this figure is I just love that, the solidity of him, the sort of brutishness of him, and he's just incredibly realized as well. It's just this sort of, he's not this kind of like pleasant, smiling sort of like pale looking Buddhist, he's just like, he's very real, his face is like, if you could can you go back to that first image of him? It's like that's my favorite image of him. It's just, he just looks quite brutal. It's like before, I mean, look, it's like you wouldn't want to meet him like down a dark alley, would you?
It's like a horny-handed peasant.
A horny-handed peasant. But that's the thing, and I suppose with like inspiration and the Refuge tree, it's just like some figures will speak to you more than others, but it's always important to, in your Dharma practice and your Dharma life, to just have sources of inspiration and follow them up, and because otherwise it just gets really dry and boring, and why would you sit and meditate for 3/4 of an hour? Okay, it might help, but it might just be a bit boring. But if you're inspired and your heart's connecting with it, then it makes it all a lot easier. And it's also, Sangha actually talked a lot about that, beauty and the need for sort of beauty, and beauty being a sort of a connection to something beyond oneself, however that is, whether it's it's being in nature, it's a teaching of some sort, it's a connection in meditation, it's looking at some flowers. It's Jack's funeral yesterday was very beautiful and very sad, so it's just sort of, just partly this whole thing is to just try and keep one's inspiration and connection sort of live and present, because it really needs to be, because there's so much work to do, like in the Dharma life. It's like you need your inspiration on board, and if the sun, as Sabiti puts it, if the sun sets on your inspiration, which is very easy to do, and I know what that is like, I'm sure all order members know what that is like. From time to time, you don't realise the sun has set on your inspiration. You need to like put some work in and get it back up again. I mean, this side of enlightenment, that's going to happen. That sort of, but it's just very, it's just very important to keep inspired, to try and keep the sort of batteries charged, and to keep a sense of momentum, because it's all about momentum and sort of movement. All right, that takes us up to 21, 29 and 55 seconds, and it's now past, so that's the end. Okay, that's it, isn't it? There's nothing else to say. No other like finish off. That's great.
Just one thing about next week. We will be dedicating the Sangha evening to Jack. So please come and
yeah. Great. Okay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone online. I hope that was all right.